US-Iran nuclear talks wrap up in Rome after 3-hour session. UN chief urges urgent aid boost to Gaza and calls for safe delivery measures. And former Israeli PM Barak slams Gaza war as move to protect ruling coalition. Good evening and welcome to our evening bulletin. I'm Mark Summers. The fifth round of indirect nuclear talks between the United States and Iran has concluded in Rome following a 3-hour session. Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs and talks negotiator Abbas Araghchi shared an update via the messaging app Telegram, posting a photo of his meeting with Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, who played a mediating role in the discussions. There has been no official comment from the United States side. Iran said the U.S. Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, left the talks early to catch a flight, while other delegates remained in Rome to continue with technical discussions. An Iranian source close to the negotiation team has indicated that nuclear talks between Iran and the United States are expected to continue, with Oman determining the time and place. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi expressed optimism about potential progress in the discussions, highlighting Oman's proposals. He acknowledged the complexity of the negotiations and emphasized the need for further dialogue. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismaili Bakai has stated that the Iran-US talks are proceeding in a professional atmosphere. He noted that the Omani Foreign Ministry already worked on facilitating communication between Iranian and American negotiators. He emphasized that media claims about the negotiation topics are mere speculation and unverified. The Omani Foreign Minister has announced that the fifth round of Iranian-US talks in Rome is noting some inconclusive progress. He expressed hope for clarifying remaining issues in the coming days to pave the way for a sustainable agreement between Tehran and Washington. Earlier this morning, the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Bakai has criticized the new U.S. sanctions imposed just before the fifth round of indirect talks, questioning Washington's commitment to diplomacy. In a post on X, he condemned these measures as unlawful and inhumane, asserting they violate the basic human rights of Iranians. He emphasized that such sanctions only strengthen the belief that the U.S. aims to obstruct Iran's progress, while the nation remains resolute against this hostility. Now, for analysis on the situation, we cross over to Selma Marwan in our newsroom. Selma.
Thank you, Mark. And for further analysis on the matter, Khalid Dawood, Al Ahram Weekly Managing Editor, joins us from Cairo. Mr. Khalid, it's a pleasure to have you as always. And delving right in, what are the key technical and political sticking points currently preventing a breakthrough in the negotiations between the United States and Iran?
Well, thanks, Sama, for having me. Again, judging by the public statements that are being made by both American and Iranian officials, the key sticking point is concerning the level of enrichment that Iran is going to be allowed or not allowed to maintain upon reaching an agreement on the Iranian nuclear activities. As you know, the former agreement that was reached under the Obama administration allowed the Iranians some degree of 3.67 of enrichment for uranium, and the Iranians insist that this is the right, that they are members of the international agreement for the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, which allows the member countries to maintain a very low level of enrichment for peaceful purposes. So the Iranians are saying that there is no violation in that respect, but the American side, and judging at least by the latest statements made by the U.S. Envoy for the negotiations, Steve Witkoff, that Iran would not even be allowed 1% of enrichment, probably upon Israeli pressure that, judging by the Iranian record of increasing the enrichment to 60% and having some secret nuclear sites, they should not be allowed any kind of enrichment. And of course, the Iranian side said that this would be a non-starter. But again, some, judging by the statements that are being made by the Khomeini foreign minister, that some progress has been made and that there will be more negotiations held in the coming days. So probably, again, there is something that they are talking about, but nobody knows the final formula that's going to satisfy both sides, how it's going to be.
Adding to that, shedding light on the new U.S. sanctions, how might the timing and the nature of these sanctions impact the diplomatic atmosphere and also Iran's willingness to engage?
Well, I think that the United States is maintaining a dual policy of maintaining maximum pressure on Iran through imposing those sanctions, and at the same time keeping open this line of negotiations. And also, some of you might note that in recent, over the past 2 days, there were reports in the U.S. press about an imminent Israeli strike against the Iranian nuclear facilities. And even that, besides the sanction, was seen as a kind of putting pressure on the Iranians to compromise and to give in to the U.S. Demands concerning the level of enrichment they're going to be allowed. So again, that's kind of the policy of the Trump administration, is that if you don't agree to our demands in the negotiations, there are going to be more sanctions, there are going to be more of a kind of punishment for the Iranian side, besides the threat about possible Israeli military strike, which most observers agree will never happen without U.S. concern, considering the consequences of such possible Israeli strike. Israel, however militarily superior it is, it cannot really kind of achieve this goal of eliminating totally the Iranian nuclear program. And of course, U.S. interest is involved. If such an Israeli strike takes place, there's going to be a lot of turmoil on the Arab Gulf region, increase in the oil prices, threats to the security of the Gulf countries. So Israel cannot claim that it can carry out alone such a huge military operation to eliminate the Iranian nuclear program.
Back to the public statements, there seems to be a lack of public statements from the U.S. side. What can we infer about Washington's strategy and objectives in these indirect talks, especially after Iran said that its uranium enrichment program remains a sovereign right?
Well, indeed, that's the kind of was the most sticking point before this round of negotiations took place, because we heard statements from the Iranian side that if the Americans continue to insist that not even 1% of enrichment is going to be allowed, that means ending the negotiations and fading of the negotiations. And at the same time, we obviously see some contradicting statements from the American side. At one point, they say they will be allowed a very minimum amount. At the other time, Witkoff would come and say not even like a small 1%, which is being allowed by the International Atomic Energy Agency. So again, it probably as well has to do with domestic pressures within the United States. There was a letter that was signed by almost 200 Republican members of Congress asking the American president not to allow the Iranians to maintain any level of enrichment before reaching agreement, because otherwise they say that would be a repetition of the 2015 agreement, which Iran agreed to give in some concessions but did not totally give up its nuclear program. But I guess also what's very important for the Iranian side is the issue of lifting those crippling sanctions that the consecutive American administrations have been putting on the Iranian side. There is no question that Iran feels probably weakened by the recent developments in the region, by losing very important allies such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and the fall of the former Syrian regime. So there's a kind of more of a siege of the Iranian government at this stage, and that's where some observers believe would push the Iranians to deliver some kind of assurances to the American side that they will not develop a nuclear program that would lead to possessing a nuclear weapon.
Now, sir, looking at the wider picture, what are the potential regional implications if the talks lead to either a breakthrough or a breakdown?
Well, of course, a breakthrough will bring in a lot of stability to the region. I mean, again, this region has been suffering a tremendous volatile situation over the past 20 months because of the Israeli genocide war against Gaza. When the war started, Iran was backing several groups, whether Hezbollah or the Iraqi Shiite groups, and again, the Houthis in Yemen to attack Israel. But then Israel managed to make a turnaround by eliminating the leader of Hezbollah, late Hassan Nasrallah, and then killing many senior Hamas leaders, including Ismail Haniyeh in Iran, while he was attending an event there. Besides Yahya Sinwar, many other leaders of the Hamas organization. So probably reaching an agreement would calm the situation, whether on those fronts, the Syrian front, the Lebanese front, and of course, maybe if that's coupled with reaching a ceasefire agreement, that would be perhaps the first sign of hope that there could be some restoration of stability in the region after this very long war that has basically weakened the economies of the region, resulted in tremendous humanitarian suffering for the Palestinian people. So a breakthrough would definitely be a very positive sign for the entire region and the security of the Arab Gulf countries. Of course, if the talks did not succeed and the American president fulfills his threats that there would be a response in a bad way, he said there could be a response in a good way, which is lifting the sanctions and reaching an agreement. And the bad way, of course, for the American president is insinuating some sort of a military strike, although I think Mr. Trump is going to be very careful before deciding to take any military action, considering his recent tour of the Arab Gulf countries, in which he received pledges to get, according to the American president, at least $2 trillion, if not more, of Gulf investments. Of course, if a war breaks out in the region or military escalation continues in case Israel attacks the Iranian side, this will definitely cause a lot of problems in the region, and there won't be any Arab Gulf investments or any kind of prosperity for the region or for the U.S. economy. So there are definitely very negative consequences in terms of security in the region, the flow of oil, security of Gulf countries, and definitely I think what most people hope for, including the Arab Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, they really hope that an agreement is going to be reached between President Trump and the Iranian side.
Mm-hmm. Now, sir, following what has been highlighted in Iran's statements, to what extent is Iran's internal political landscape influencing its negotiation posture and messaging around the talks?
I mean, indeed, the Iranians are under a lot of pressure. There's no question that the Iranian economy is in shambles. I mean, Iran is a big country with a huge young population, and they definitely need the lifting of the sanctions so that at least they can have some money to finance the urgent needs of the Iranian people. So domestic considerations are a very important factor within Iran, and I'm sure that the American side is aware of those kinds of internal pressures, that there is a very big need within Iran to restore its oil production, to end many sanctions that were imposed on the Iranian side by the first Trump administration and continue to happen until today. So certainly domestic issues and the regional situation are both very important factors in influencing the Iranian negotiating tactics on the ongoing talks with the United States.
That was Khalid Dawood from Cairo, Al Ahram Weekly Managing Editor. Thank you so much for joining us here on Qnews. And now we go back to Mark in our studio.
Thank you very much, Selma. Selma Marwan there in our newsroom. And now let's get the latest developments from Gaza. United Nations Secretary General is calling for an urgent increase in humanitarian aid to Gaza, along with enhanced safety measures to ensure its delivery. Antonio Guterres warned that Palestinians in Gaza are enduring what may be the most brutal phase of the conflict to date. For almost 80 days, the flow of life-saving international aid was blocked. While recent steps have allowed limited aid to enter the besieged territory, the volume remains far below what is needed. The UN says the current level of assistance is critically insufficient and has stressed the need for a sustained and substantial scale-up in aid delivery. For the first time in 11 weeks, humanitarian aid has reached Gaza, delivering urgently needed supplies, including flour, medicines, and therapeutic nutrition. That's according to the UN. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs confirmed that around 90 aid trucks passed through the Kerem Abu Salem crossing on Thursday, bringing relief to communities facing the growing threat. The World Health Organization has issued a grave warning that Gaza's health system is on the brink of collapse. Only 19 of the territory's 36 hospitals remain partially functional, and 4 have suspended operations altogether. The WHO reports that 94% of Gaza's health facilities have suffered damage or destruction amid ongoing Israeli bombardments and mass displacement. The agency warned that without immediate international support, the consequences could be catastrophic. Dozens of parliamentarians from across the globe are calling for urgent action to end the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. In a joint statement, they warned that Israel's blockade has led to critical shortages, putting over 2 million Palestinians at risk of famine. The lawmakers demanded the immediate and unconditional reopening of all border crossings to allow the unimpeded entry of humanitarian aid, particularly food and medicine. Hamas criticized the scale and distribution of aid entering Gaza, calling it a drop in the ocean compared to actual needs. The group warned against Israeli efforts to establish makeshift camps in southern Gaza under the guise of humanitarian operations. In a statement, Hamas described Israel's new aid distribution plan as a deliberate engineering of starvation, accusing Tel Aviv of using aid as a tool of control rather than relief. Al-Ouda Hospital in northern Gaza reported that Israeli forces detonated an explosive device via a remote-controlled robot near the hospital premises. The blast caused extensive damage to the facility, and fires continue to rage in the medical warehouse. Medical staff warned that the ongoing fire threatens vital medical supplies, worsening the already dire humanitarian and health crisis. The hospital has appealed to the International Committee of the Red Cross and the World Health Organization for urgent intervention. The Israeli occupation military has said it has struck over 75 targets across Gaza in the past 24 hours under the ongoing Gideon's Chariots campaign. According to Israeli media, the strikes hit military buildings, weapons storage facilities, and sniper positions. The campaign, described as part of a broader operation to weaken Hamas capabilities, comes amid growing international concern over civilian casualties. Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 28 Palestinians in multiple attacks on central and southern Gaza since dawn. According to our correspondent, 11 people were killed when Israeli forces bombed a home in Khan Yunis in the south. In a separate assault, Israeli artillery targeted the Tel al-Sultan neighborhood in western Rafah. Dozens of injuries have also been reported as air and ground operations intensify. The Gaza Civil Defense has confirmed that more than 50 Palestinians were either killed or remain missing after an Israeli airstrike targeted a residential home in Jabalia el-Balad in northern Gaza. Rescue operations are ongoing, with a significant number of victims still trapped beneath the rubble. Civil defense teams have so far recovered 14 bodies and several wounded individuals from the debris. The scale of destruction suggests the death toll could rise significantly. "80 countries issued a joint statement warning that Gaza is experiencing the worst humanitarian crisis since the Israeli war on the enclave began on October 7, 2023. The statement emphasized that civilians are facing an imminent risk of famine. The countries urged the United Nations during Civilian Protection Week to fulfill its legal obligation to safeguard non-combatants during conflict. The statement underscored that civilian protection is not optional but a binding duty under international humanitarian law. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak has criticized the ongoing war in Gaza, calling it a political operation designed to preserve the ruling coalition. He urged the government to seek the return of all captives in a single deal and bring an end to the war. Barak warned that attempts to displace 2 million Palestinians and replace them with Israeli settlers are dangerous illusions. They will only deepen Israel's global isolation and risk the lives of hostages still held in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office has confirmed that he remains fully responsible for national security, particularly in the context of a multi-front war. The statement followed his nomination of David Zini as the new head of Shin Bet. The move is pending approval by the Senior Appointments Committee. Netanyahu's office stressed that appointing a permanent director during wartime is critical rather than relying on interim leadership. Lebanon has announced the formation of a joint committee tasked with addressing conditions inside Palestinian refugee camps across the country. According to our correspondent, sources confirm that the Lebanese-Palestinian Dialogue Committee will initiate a phased disarmament process inside the camps, set to begin in June. The roadmap includes a clear timeline for handing over weapons and is aimed at restoring state authority and security. Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon have intensified, causing casualties and panic among residents, while raising concerns over the escalating tensions.
Southern Lebanon was rocked by a series of intense Israeli airstrikes, with the Al-Nabateya region bearing the brunt of the bombardment in what local officials are calling one of the heaviest assaults since the truce agreement last November. According to Lebanon's state-run national news agency, Israeli warplanes targeted valleys and wooded areas around villages in southern Lebanon. The strikes were concentrated on the Ali Tahir forest and an adjacent archaeological site, triggering widespread panic and promoting the evacuation of schools across the region. Heavy traffic gridlock was reported as families rushed to collect their children, fearing further escalation. At least 2 people were killed and 8 others injured in the attacks. Hezbollah has confirmed that 2 of its fighters, Ali Mohammed Shahrour and Bassem Ali Assef, both from the town of Haruf al-Nabateya district, were among the dead. The Lebanese Ministry of Health has so far reported 1 fatality and 8 injuries. The Israeli occupation military claimed the air raids targeted what it described as a strategic Hezbollah underground facility, now said to be disabled. Lebanese officials, however, condemned the strikes as a flagrant breach of national sovereignty and a violation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, which governs the ceasefire agreement between the two sides. Government offices across Al-Nabatiyya were ordered shut, while emergency services scrambled to respond to the aftermath. Ambulances were seen rushing to impacted areas as residents sheltered indoors amid growing fears of an expanded military confrontation. The airstrikes mark a serious escalation along the Lebanese-Israeli border, fueling concern over the potential for a broader conflict and deepening the toll on civilians caught in the crossfire.
And he's safe there with that report. Now just time for a recap of the main headlines this evening. US-Iran nuclear talks wrap up in Rome after a 3-hour session. UN chief urges urgent aid boost to Gaza and calls for safe delivery measures. And former Israeli Prime Minister Barak slams Gaza war as a move to protect ruling coalition. And that's all for our news bulletin for this hour. But don't forget you can follow Q News on our social media platforms. We're there at Qnews, EGY. Stay informed with us. Thanks for watching and have a very good evening.